I love this quote, and I've been using it for like 10 years, and there are different versions of it, because he also took it a little from whatever. He says here, what we need to do here is, in order to go from where we are now, which is kind of stuck, and opening up our doors to include this spatiality into it, because we've been kind of, hammered into, we've had these two for so long, that we need to kind of like, shit, so how am I going to go and create space in my own way of thinking to start including the spatial dimension, to see what it's going to start offering me? Because you kind of say, okay, so I'm going to start acknowledging space. Well, good luck. Because that's a complex thing to sort of say, okay, how am I going to go include this? Well, what he starts saying here is this. And this is really what all of modernism has had to go through. And any concept in philosophy that is stuck has to go through. The deconstruction and strategic reconstitution of conventional modernistic epistemologies. In other words, the radical restructuring of long-established modes of knowledge formation, of how we assure that the knowledge we obtain of the world can be confidently presumed to be accurate and useful. I'll go through it again. The deconstruction, so you take it apart. Strategic reconstitution, so you know how something is constituted, how it's been put together, so strategically re-put together of conventional modernistic epistemology. The epistemologies are knowledges, knowings, wetenschap. So to break it apart and strategically put it back together again with this inclusive concept is. And as a result, a radical restructuring of long-established modes of knowledge formation, of how we generate knowledge, how do we form knowledge. Right? So that's really what he's trying to open up us in to start understanding. Now, so what are some of these other spaces? Can you guys throw up some words that you might have, or some other kind of spaces that you might know about? If I say to you, give me a couple of ideas of types of spaces.
Public space.
Anyone else? At least one per person. Two, preferably.
Private.
You took it, so you lost that one. Okay. Who else? We don't have all day.
Aleph. Aleph.
Aleph.
Aleph. A-L-A-P-H.
A-L-A-P-H. Aleph space?
Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone know what it is?
No.
You want to share?
This is
Within 30 seconds?
within 30 seconds. Well, it's from the book, saying the other space, something that you actually cannot formulate. So you acknowledge it's always, you think of dialectical terms, public, private, or maybe you have to acknowledge there's always something else, undefinable. It's just a philosophical
Okay.
term.
So in other words, it's another word for third space. What we just started with. A space that is actually undefinable, because spaces. So that's one that actually encompasses all the potentials, because it's actually not a space. So give me another one. Public, private.
Virtual.
Virtual, okay, go on.
Work.
Workspace, okay.
Hidden spaces.
Hidden spaces, nice
Personal.
title.
Secure.
Personal, sorry, personal. Secure, oops. Okay, so we got a couple here. Now, maybe this can help. And they're also in alphabetical order for easy reading. These are just a few. I was surprised the women didn't throw at me gender space. Or woman's space.
What would that be?
Well, you're part of it, whether you like it or not. Whether you like it or not, it's there. Whether you like it or not, when you're somewhere there, you either, it doesn't have to be that you have to acknowledge it. Your female presence in a space shifts it. And so there's going to be a dialogue always between the presence of a social being in space. There's also women's space in women's authority. We're not going to claim the city.
Yeah, but then all my characteristics define a space. Because I'm much more.
They influence. They definitely influence. But let's not get into too much on one detail, since you're getting into that nitty gritty mode again. No, we need to slow you down a bit.
You know,
But here's just, are you picking up all these different kind of spaces?
if
that
it's
they exist?
everything, it's nothing.
No, but are you picking up that all these kind of spaces exist?
Okay.
These are just all different ways, because the point is, it's not about what you think, it's about that someone can say, I acknowledge women's space, so it exists. If someone says, I want to look at political space, because that's something that's there. Someone says, I want to look at cultural space. Someone says, I want to understand, the concrete space. So these are all ways of us talking and dealing and understanding all those levels of space. And of course, depending a little bit on how you're evolving as a person individually and how you're evolving on that area of case study that you're looking at, certain understandings of space will help you get a better informed understanding of that area to make a better informed intervention or strategy or whatever.
But isn't the concept of acknowledging space the essence of converting space into a place?
Space and place is something that, interestingly enough, a lot of people contemporary like to make that distinction. Place space could be within the P's here. For me, I can say on a personal level, I use not so much the word place, but I use the word placedness. And so space, we can say, is the absolute, the all, the anything. So without having defined, one kind of space, so the spatial dimension, all-encompassing. Place, for me, is when that space has been given an attribute, a quality. So then it's like, okay, but for me also, here's the problem why I don't prefer to use the word place, but I talk about placeness. Because if I and a friend are, sitting together and kind of squatting a piece of the city, whether it's under the tree in a park, whether it's in the city center, whether it's on a sidewalk, when we appropriate that space, we give it definition. It becomes our space, and for us, it's our space. And maybe for someone else, that's just a place where the jongeren are gathering. But it's like, that's the plek. It's been given an identity, whether by their point of view, or whether from my point of view. But when we go, for us, it just disappears. But the memory of that place still exists in the minds of the people who've been seeing us, and us as users who've been there. And maybe there might be one person in the group that might want to tag the wall or inscribe, I was here, as we often see. How we kind of keep traces of our spatial existence. Now here's a great little work on the life in America that talks about different kind of spaces and investigates just ways of looking and sharing about what this space actually is. Here we're talking about basically a neighborhood, social housing neighborhood. Huge, basically are referred to as large urban projects, LUPs, which is kind of the end of modernity, but also it was the second modernity phase. The digital space, which is monitoring us. This is a school. What do you see there? Art space. This is actually a video which I couldn't quite get working well, but he basically just has a couple of empty paint jars she's just drumming on. So, musical space. I'm trying to get some money, of course. Commercial space. The homeless space. We mapped all the homeless in Madrid in the project in the past. It was very beautiful working together with them. This one I'll leave for you to read. So this is just a, a playful way of looking and starting to document what you see and acknowledging parts of the city that aren't, quite so clear, so defined, and because we just see them as kind of residual effects of the city, they're kind of in the marginal. But they make the city, they define the city, and sometimes more than we would like them. But it's a city that's covered by CCTVs, or it's a city covered with graffiti. There's always this relationship between, when I get into this idea of triads now, of that which is being represented, that which is that's actually doing the representing, and then comes the moment of the representation, which, like me and my friends on the corner of the street doing something, can be, we're there, we're in dialogue, we're present, we are busy chatting or doing whatever, but our being there is now being translated and interpreted by multiple people. So the old woman on the corner on the first floor looks down and goes, the hangjongeren are there. The representation. That's the moment when it becomes open, it becomes translated. She has no idea what we're doing. She has no acute understanding of what's happening there. But it becomes, somehow our being is now represented, and as a result gets also translated, and a second of representation. So we have here the signifier, that what I'm doing, and that's me, the signifier. The signified, that's actually the action that I'm taking care of. And then the signification, which is then open, which goes into myriad ways how that gets understood. Whether from me, how I leave myself there as a trace, or how I'm interpreted in a certain space. Now, Henri Lefebvre has this beautiful set of triads that help us to open up to this third aspect. So it's not just whether you're there or you're not there, but there's also the representation of your non-there-ness, of the fact that you were there, also becomes as fundamental to understand, because it's as vital for either your understanding of a place or your designing for what potentials in a space could be. Another one, a melody, for those who do into music, melody, rhythm, and harmony. Very clear differences. Total contradiction, possibility. But you can go on for these. These are a couple of key ones that he throws out that show also that there is something third, there's something else that is just beyond the duality that we've always been using. We're working very much in binaries. And he's here trying to open up that there's more richness, because it's not just between the two, there's also that other, the Aleph, in fact. So if there's a third space, then this means there will be a first and a second. Now, he talks here, and he uses here first, second, third space. Henri Lefebvre used here perceived space, conceived space, and lived space. I think I should be for you a little bit easier to understand. Conceived and lived. I mean, it was basically espace perçu, espace conçu. So the perception, the conception, and then the inhabitation, the living of it. He says here, so first space here runs to the perceived space. First space epistemologies tend to privilege objectivity and materiality and aim toward a formal science of space. Human occupation of the surface of the earth, relations between society and nature, the architectonics and resulting geographies of the human-built environment, all of these things. So this is basically what you see, what's perceived, what's physically there, and that you can account for and you can document it and say, hey, that's the space. Also very much you can see in the Cartesian notion of space. You guys know the Cartesian notion of space, Descartes? So the square meters, that's the boundary of space. It's very clear, okay? That's how many square meters that space has. So you can represent it as that, we can also have, so that's perceived space. That what you see, and he, having to study as a social geographer, told me that how he was going crazy, that he was, told, this is